If I was ranking the rinks from around the community to Minnesota to Iowa, all the way to Pierre, I would rank it close to the bottom or at the bottom.
The facilities here are definitely subpar. You know, a lot of kids that skate here have some asthma and allergy problems, and when you're talking about the expo building, the dust and the air out there just isn't conducive for those kids to play hockey. The rinks really are very cold too, really especially in the January and February months. When you compare it to other rinks around the state and even other states that we've played in, it's just really not good.
No one's too impressed with Sioux Falls ice facilities. You hear mostly they call it the barn, and they're referring to our expo building, and they call it the barn because it smells like animals when you come in.
The first time I walked into the Sioux Falls Rec Center, I was just really shocked and taken aback by the quality of the rink and just the overall condition. I just was overcome by the smell of horses, and it was very dingy and dark.
Everybody's very disappointed in the facilities that we have here in Sioux Falls. You look at a lot of the smaller communities, and their answer or question to us always is, how come we as a smaller community can fundraise the money to get this nice facility that we have, and Sioux Falls can't do anything to get a nice facility for your children and for our children to come when we play.
The quality of the ice is a lot lower. The building is in need of some work. The ice has, especially when the weather changes, the ice gets bumps on it from the ceiling leaking.
But the facilities are horrible for girls there. The locker rooms are for guys, they're for hockey players. The girls need mirrors, they need bars, the bathrooms are terrible. And if you're the parent of a little girl, bringing her out or trying to get her involved in something, that facility is going to turn you off instantly. I mean, it is a huge problem with the figure skating.
The warming rooms and dressing areas in the other rinks are a lot better than ours, because I know that at the expo we had to dress where the Zamboni sits because the dressing rooms were bad.
Well, first of all, the rinks that we go and compete in are regulation size, and the one that we have now is not. So that's one thing that the girls struggle with but do very well with, is that the rink that they practice on is smaller.
The rink is not the standard size that a rink is kind of an issue, because when the students are practicing, it's fine, but then when they go to competition to do their program, it totally changes the dynamic of the program.
One of our final games this year, when we had an early morning Sunday game, and it was a 7:30 game at the expo, we were playing Mitchell, and they had to come in to play us. And of course, the expo ice went down in the corner where there was a huge hole in the ice. They ended up calling the game. And after they called the game, several Mitchell parents came over to the Sioux Falls families and were very unhappy and voiced their opinion on how this was obviously a substandard rink. We went to reschedule the game. Mitchell wouldn't come to Sioux Falls again.
We had to move the state tournament from here because the expo wasn't good enough.
A lot of other communities were very unhappy that we had to move to Sioux Center. Number one was it was quite a bit longer of a drive for them. The other thing was they were upset that we couldn't have it in the South Dakota community. In the end, it all worked out fine. The tournament went off without a hitch, but just that extra travel and trying to find enough hotels for all the teams and everything down there in such a short amount of time was a big hassle.
The lack of ice time creates a lot of very significant challenges for the families in our community. This time of year, you've got figure skaters traveling to practice, which is an interesting concept if you think about it. A lot of people associate traveling to another community purely with competition, but we've got youth and their families packing up their vans and heading up and down the interstates to travel for practice sessions, which is really unheard of with any other youth sport in our community. We have serious figure skaters who travel every week to either Brookings or Sioux City. They pay for the ice time out of their own pockets, and plus the transportation costs just to get ice time so they can compete in the summer competitions, and that's what's necessary.
I was really surprised with the quality of the skaters and how successful they are and how much potential they all have with the limited ice time, because they don't have summer ice, for instance, so they take either they have to take the whole summer off or they have to travel to go get ice time, and that is just not normal for competitive figure skaters that are really serious about it. It's actually really, I think, frustrating for them.
Traveling to practice is definitely a hassle. You have to spend a long time in the car, and it's definitely worth it because once you're there you get to skate and you get a good practice in usually. And if we could use the time we're using to travel to practice to actually skate, we could have so much more time and just get a better practice in overall.
I love skating and I love playing hockey. I love the ice time that we get, but it just takes too much out of me to have that morning practice, go to school, and sometimes even have night practice in the same day.
And for 11 and 12-year-olds, that means getting them to the rink by 6 o'clock. So, we're up by 5. Get them to the rink by 6 o'clock. Your practice is over at 7. Getting them back to home to get them showered before school. You're getting a lot of things done with a young child for 3 hours in the morning. And those most commonly are taking place in January, when of course we lose the expo ice due to the farm show, and the whole organization is down to a single sheet of ice for practices.
Also, a lot of times in January when we lose that extra sheet of ice, we have to practice outdoors. In January, as you know, the wind blows a little bit here, and so it gets very, very cold. And in fact, we probably skipped half of our January practices just because it was so cold. We can't have our kids out there at 7 o'clock at night, 30, 40 degrees below with the wind chill. It just is not safe for them to be out there. So we skipped a lot of practices because of that.
We have a number of kids in the organization and on Jordan's team this year that couldn't get to those morning practices just for logistical purposes. Families working, kids who live a little ways out of town, weather reasons. That team was really starting to come together as we moved towards a state tournament, and yet most of our practices in the month of January were outdoors or in the morning, and they weren't able to practice with a full team, and they weren't able to practice on full ice. So that does make it tough. It would be much more conducive for school and everything else to be able to have normal practice time. But not only normal practice time, but practices that are productive, more than a half sheet of ice that you're splitting with another team from 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning.
With our ice rinks right now, we have to split time, and so last year we used to have an hour practice. Now this past season we've had to have 45-minute practices because there's less ice time.
Practicing on half ice, for 45 minutes, you really don't get much done. If you practice on full ice for an hour, you get a lot done.
The fairgrounds, obviously being the second of the 2 sheets of ice in the community, the part-time sheet, if you will, it really does present an interesting situation, an interesting challenge to youth hockey and to figure skating, in that it is the only second option we have. However, you've got a facility that's really inadequate in terms of the creature comforts, if you will. The creatures that are meant to inhabit that building aren't ones that are typically on skates. But more importantly, you've got a situation with dated infrastructure. You've got user groups paying deferred maintenance on compressors and facilities just to keep the ice going, because the reality of it is, if we were to lose that second sheet of ice for an entire season, by conservative estimates, youth hockey, for example, believes their numbers would return to numbers maybe associated with the early to mid-90s. So there's no question that the deferred maintenance and the economic reality of trying to put ice in at the expo, take ice out, and then put it back in has created a situation where, for all intents and purposes, we're kind of throwing good money after bad.